That night, when Ethan's phone lit up with another notification, he almost didn't check it. He was already irritated enough. After the fight with his girlfriend earlier, he was sure it was another long message from her explaining how selfish, arrogant, and emotionally unavailable he was. Honestly, Ethan was one more paragraph away from blocking her completely. Annoyed, he unlocked his phone anyway. But instead of his girlfriend's name, it was the swimming team group chat. And the sender was Kai Nakamura. "I'm leaving the swim team." For a second, Ethan thought he read it wrong. Then slowly, the irritation on his face disappeared. A strange feeling settled inside his chest instead. Heavy, uncomfortable, and Ethan immediately hated it. Weeks ago, he would have celebrated seeing a message like this. He had wanted Kai gone almost from the beginning. Kai was competition. Dangerous competition. The kind Ethan Hayes hated most. But now that Kai was actually leaving, why didn't it feel satisfying? Ethan leaned back against the bed silently, staring at the message again. Not because he cared about Kai personally. At least that's what he told himself. But because deep down Ethan knew exactly why Kai was leaving. And somehow, that made the guilt feel worse. The memory from earlier replayed in his head immediately. Kai looking terrified of him. The sound of his broken glasses hitting the floor. The way Kai tried so hard not to cry while holding his injured hand. Even thinking about it now made Ethan feel sick in a way he wasn't used to. Like he had crossed some line he couldn't take back. Fuck. Ethan rubbed his face tiredly before quickly grabbing his phone again. Then he called Kai. Once. Twice. 3 times. No answer. Then suddenly, call failed. Ethan frowned immediately before realizing what happened. Kai had blocked him. For a moment, Ethan just stared at the screen in disbelief. Then irritation immediately mixed with the guilt inside him. Seriously? After that, Ethan tried texting him instead. Still nothing. Not even a single response. And somehow, that annoyed Ethan more than it should have. He was Ethan Hayes. People waited for his attention. People chased him. Most students would lose their minds if Ethan Hayes personally spent 30 minutes calling and texting them nonstop. But Kai? Kai ignored him like Ethan meant absolutely nothing. Ethan scoffed quietly before throwing his phone onto the bed beside him. His attitude is seriously bigger than his size, he muttered under his breath. Then another thought crossed his mind immediately after. I didn't kill him. It was an accident. He's acting like I ruined his entire life. What a baby. For a moment, Ethan tried convincing himself that Kai leaving shouldn't matter at all. In fact, maybe this was actually better. At this point, Ethan already knew how talented Kai really was. Maybe too talented. And Ethan had also noticed how Coach Mercer looked at Kai lately. The praise. The attention. The belief. Ethan hated admitting it, but Kai had become a real threat to him. So maybe this solved everything. Maybe Kai leaving was actually a good thing. But before Ethan could fully settle into that thought, another realization hit him immediately. The national tournament was only 2 weeks away. And winning that competition meant everything. Prestige. Recognition. Attention. For the university. For Coach Mercer. And especially for Ethan Hayes. And no matter how much Ethan hated admitting it, Kai was important. Very important. Without Kai, their chances of winning dropped immediately. Ethan stared silently at Kai's message again. Then slowly, he picked his phone back up. No. He wasn't letting Kai leave the team. Not now. Not before the tournament. And definitely not because of him. The next morning, Ethan kept looking toward the swimming pool entrance during practice. Part of him expected Kai to walk in at any second. Maybe he changed his mind overnight. Maybe Coach Mercer already talked to him. Maybe Kai was just being dramatic yesterday and would quietly return like usual. But practice started. And Kai never came. Ethan's mood darkened immediately. Where's Kai? Coach Mercer suddenly asked while checking attendance. For a second, Ethan froze slightly before answering casually. I don't know. The lie came out too easily. Coach Mercer looked at him for a little too long, like he knew Ethan was hiding something. Then from the other side of the pool, Jacob laughed loudly. Maybe the baby finally got tired of swimming. Several teammates laughed immediately after him. Even Ethan almost smirked automatically out of habit, but the expression disappeared from his face just as quickly, because suddenly all he could remember was Kai looking terrified of him, holding his injured hand while trying not to cry. The guilt returned instantly, heavy and uncomfortable. For the rest of practice, Ethan stayed unusually quiet, and Coach Mercer noticed. Coach Mercer wasn't stupid. Ethan knew the coach already understood something had happened between them, but nobody on the team would openly question Ethan Hayes. Not directly. And Coach Mercer probably knew that too. Still, Ethan wasn't too worried. Coach Mercer always found a way to fix problems. And Ethan was certain the coach would somehow convince Kai to return before the tournament. So Ethan forced himself to focus on practice instead. But the second day came, and Kai still didn't show up. That was when Ethan truly started getting irritated. The national tournament was only 2 weeks away. Missing even one practice before a competition that important was insane. But Kai missed 2 full days. And somehow, that made Ethan both anxious and angry at the same time. Everything felt wrong without him there. The rhythm of practice felt different. Incomplete. Ethan hated it. He hated how distracted he was becoming because of Kai. And honestly, he still couldn't understand why Kai was reacting like this. It wasn't like Ethan meant to hurt him. It was an accident. A stupid moment. So, why was Kai acting like the world ended? Ethan genuinely couldn't understand it. But for Kai, it wasn't something small at all. Being bullied with words was one thing. Kai had endured that his entire life. But Ethan had hurt him physically. Used strength against him. And somehow that hurt even more because it was Ethan. So, even when Coach Mercer called him again and again, Kai never answered. Because deep down, Kai knew if he listened to Coach Mercer's voice for even a minute, he would become weak again. And he couldn't allow himself to go back this time. That night, while Kai sat alone in his dorm room thinking about everything, a sudden knock echoed through the room. Kai frowned slightly before standing up slowly. Nobody usually visited him this late. Confused, he walked toward the door and opened it. And the moment he saw who was standing outside, Kai froze completely, because standing there was none other than Ethan Hayes. When Kai opened the door, Ethan Hayes was standing outside with his usual confident smirk. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, without waiting for an invitation, Ethan walked straight into the apartment. Kai sighed in annoyance and shut the door behind him. Ethan's confidence lasted only a few seconds. The moment his eyes landed on Kai's bandaged hand and the healing cut on his forehead, guilt hit him all over again. The images from that night flashed through his mind. Kai crying. Kai looking terrified. Kai asking him why he would do something like that. Ethan immediately looked away. "What are you doing here?" Kai asked coldly. "I wouldn't be here if you answered your phone."
Kai didn't respond.
That answer alone was enough to irritate him. Ethan crossed his arms. "So, why aren't you coming to practice?" Kai stared at him. The disbelief on his face was almost insulting. "Don't pretend you don't know why." For the first time, Ethan looked slightly uncomfortable. "Kai." He exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry, all right?" Kai remained silent.
"It happened."
"I lost my temper." And Ethan frowned. "And I'm telling you to come back." Kai laughed softly. Not because anything was funny, because he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You think saying sorry fixes everything?"
"No."
"Then what?" Ethan rubbed his forehead. "Things happen sometimes."
"No, Ethan."
Kai's voice became firmer. "They don't." The room fell silent. Kai lifted his injured hand. "I already ignored the jokes." His voice shook slightly. "I ignored people laughing at me." Another pause. "I ignored being treated like I didn't belong." Then he looked directly at Ethan. "But you hurt me." The words hit harder than Ethan expected. And that isn't normal. For a moment, guilt appeared on Ethan's face again. But then his pride took over. "Stop acting like a weak person." Kai's eyes widened. "What?" "You heard me." Ethan stood straighter. "You're 18, Kai. Stop running away every time something goes wrong." The anger that Kai had been holding back finally surfaced. "Stop talking to me like that," His voice was sharper now. You don't get to decide how I should feel. Ethan's jaw tightened. And you don't get to quit just because life gets difficult. Kai couldn't believe what he was hearing. You're pathetic. The words slipped out before he could stop them. The room instantly became silent. Ethan froze. Nobody talked to him like that. Nobody. Not his teammates. Not his friends. Not even most adults. Yet here was Kai Nakamura calling him pathetic to his face. For a second, genuine anger flashed in Ethan's eyes. But he forced it down. The tournament. That was why he was here. Not to argue. Not to fight. The tournament. So Ethan took a slow breath and spoke calmly. Fine. His voice was controlled. You can hate me all you want. Kai folded his arms. But don't do this. Ethan continued. The tournament is in 2 weeks. So think about the university. Kai didn't react. Think about Coach Mercer. That got his attention. Ethan noticed immediately. You know how much this means to him. Kai looked away. Ethan pressed on. And you know how much you've worked for this. The room became quiet. Then Ethan spoke more softly. If you still want to leave after the tournament, leave. Kai laughed again. This time it sounded bitter. There it is. Ethan frowned. What? The real reason you're here?
Kai shook his head.
You don't care about me. The words stung more than Ethan expected. You care about winning. A small smile appeared on Kai's face. Everyone was right. Ethan already knew what was coming. You're selfish. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan nodded once. Maybe he was. But he wasn't about to admit that. Instead, he pointed at Kai. You're making a mistake.
No. Kai shook his head.
You did. The words landed perfectly. Ethan stared at him. Then finally, he headed toward the door. Think about what I said. I'm not coming back. Kai. I'm not coming back. The finality in Kai's voice surprised even him. Ethan looked at him for several seconds. Then he nodded once. Fine. He opened the door. But before stepping outside, he looked back one last time. Just don't do something stupid. Kai didn't answer. Instead,
bang.
The door slammed directly in Ethan's face. Silence. Complete silence. Ethan stood there staring at the closed door. Nobody had ever done that to him before. Not once. Not his teammates. Not his family. Not his parents. Not anyone. Yet somehow this 18-year-old had ignored him, argued with him, called him pathetic, refused to listen, and then slammed a door in his face. The humiliation burned. Slowly, Ethan clenched his jaw. Then he turned and walked away. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, the scene replayed itself. The door slamming in his face. Kai telling him to leave. Kai refusing to return. Kai looking him straight in the eyes and calling him selfish. Most of all, Kai refusing to listen to him. It was ridiculous. It shouldn't have bothered him. Yet somehow it did. More than he wanted to admit. Ethan rolled onto his back and stared at the ceiling. The anger returned immediately. Nobody treated Ethan Hayes like that. Nobody. A bitter smile appeared on his face. I'll remember this, Kai Nakamura. The words disappeared into the darkness. But somehow, even as he said them, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about him. Meanwhile, inside the apartment, Kai leaned against the door and closed his eyes.
He was exhausted.
Tired of Ethan. Tired of the team. Tired of constantly feeling like his feelings didn't matter. And despite everything Ethan had said, Kai's decision remained the same. He wasn't going back. At least, that was what he thought. Until Coach Mercer started calling again. And again. And again. Eventually, Kai realized ignoring him wouldn't solve anything. With a sigh, he finally answered. The moment the call connected, Coach Mercer's voice filled the room. Kai Nakamura, what the hell happened? Kai froze. For a moment, he considered lying. I just want to focus on studying. Kai. The coach's voice became firmer. Tell me the truth. The concern in his voice broke something inside Kai. Slowly, he told him everything. The argument. The injury. The way Ethan lost control. The silence on the other end of the call lasted several seconds. When Coach Mercer finally spoke again, his voice was full of anger. I knew he did something. Kai blinked. What? I knew there was a reason. Coach Mercer let out a frustrated breath. Then he spoke more gently. But listen to me carefully. Kai stayed silent. I am not letting you leave because of Ethan Hayes. The firmness in his voice surprised Kai. Don't come back for me. Don't come back for the university. A pause. Come back for yourself. Kai lowered his head. You worked too hard for this. Coach Mercer's voice softened. And Ethan was threatened by you. Kai froze. That's why he acted the way he did. The words hit harder than expected. So prove him right, Coach continued. Prove you're good enough to stand beside him. Then his voice became even gentler. You can't spend your whole life running away every time someone tries to push you down. Tears filled Kai's eyes. He quickly wiped them away. I don't want to face them again. For the first time, his voice sounded small. Coach Mercer didn't hesitate. You won't face them alone. The words immediately broke through Kai's defenses. I'm with you. Silence filled the room. And for the first time since leaving the team, Kai felt a little stronger. A little less alone. Maybe Coach Mercer was right. Maybe leaving wasn't the answer. Maybe this time, he should stay and fight. And because Kai had never been good at saying no to Coach Mercer. The next morning, he found himself walking back toward the swimming pool. When Coach Mercer saw Kai walking back into practice, a proud smile immediately appeared on his face. That's my boy. He patted Kai's back, making Kai smile awkwardly. From across the pool, Ethan watched the scene unfold. A small sense of satisfaction settled inside him.
See?
He came back. A part of Ethan was convinced that his visit to Kai's apartment had worked. Maybe Kai had finally realized he was overreacting. Unfortunately, not everyone seemed happy about Kai's return. Look who's back, Jacob called out loudly. The baby returned. Several swimmers laughed. The laughter lasted only a second, because Ethan looked up. Just one look. Nothing more. Yet it was enough. Jacob immediately stopped laughing and looked away. The others quickly followed. After that day, nobody openly mocked Kai in front of Ethan again. Not because they respected Kai, but because nobody wanted to get on Ethan Hayes' bad side. Kai noticed. And didn't care. His entire focus was on the tournament. Nothing else mattered. Ethan noticed something else.
Kai had changed.
The bright smile that used to appear whenever someone talked to him was gone. The nervousness was gone too. Now there was only focus, determination, and a quiet confidence that hadn't existed before. It made Ethan uncomfortable. Every day Kai trained harder. Every day he swam faster. Every day he looked more dangerous. Not physically, competitively. For the first time since joining the team, Kai looked like someone capable of taking Ethan's place. And Ethan hated that thought. One evening after practice, the pool had almost emptied. Only Ethan and Kai remained. Kai was putting away his equipment when Ethan suddenly spoke. So you came back with a plan. Kai didn't even look at him. What plan? To beat me. That made Kai raise his head. If that's what you think. The calmness in his voice irritated Ethan immediately. Stop talking to me like that. Kai raised an eyebrow. Like what? Like we're equals. The words escaped before Ethan could stop them. A faint smile appeared on Kai's face. You really don't get it, do you? Ethan's jaw tightened. Get what? Kai zipped up his bag. You're insecure. For a second, Ethan simply stared at him. Then he laughed. A cold laugh. Seriously? You think I'm insecure of you? He took a step closer. If I was insecure, I would have let you quit. Kai's expression didn't change. I didn't come back because of you. The words immediately wiped the amusement off Ethan's face. I came back because of Coach Mercer. Another pause followed. Then Kai looked directly into his eyes. You're nothing to me, Ethan. The silence that followed felt heavy. You weren't important enough to influence my decision. Something dark flashed across Ethan's face.
Nobody spoke to him like that.
Nobody. Not his teammates. Not his friends. Not even his own family. Yet somehow Kai Nakamura continued doing it without hesitation. For a moment Ethan looked like he wanted to say something. Instead, he grabbed his bag. Before leaving, he stopped beside Kai. "Don't forget who Ethan Hayes is." Then he walked away. But the conversation refused to leave his mind. For the rest of the night, the words repeated over and over. "You're nothing to me. Not important enough." The more Ethan thought about them, the angrier he became. Kai had attitude. Ethan knew that. But this much? It was ridiculous. "I haven't even shown him my real side yet." Ethan muttered to himself. "He thinks he can talk to me like that?" Even later that night, while lying in bed beside his girlfriend, he couldn't focus. Every time he closed his eyes, Kai's face appeared. The cold expression, the dismissive voice, the complete lack of respect. At one point, his girlfriend finally lost her patience. "Ethan, are you even listening to me?"
What?
She rolled her eyes. "Exactly." She got up and walked away, clearly annoyed. But Ethan barely noticed, because his thoughts were still occupied by someone else.
Kai.
The next morning, Ethan arrived at practice earlier than usual, then earlier again the next day. And the day after that, he trained harder than ever before. Longer sessions, faster laps, more intensity. He wanted Kai to see who he was. He wanted Kai to remember why Ethan Hayes was considered the best swimmer in the university. But Kai never reacted. Not once. If Ethan broke a practice record, Kai simply continued swimming. If Ethan dominated a race, Kai barely looked at him. If Ethan entered the room, Kai acted like he wasn't even there. And somehow that irritated Ethan more than any insult ever could. Because for the first time in his life, Ethan Hayes wanted someone's attention. And he couldn't get it. The tournament arrived sooner than anyone expected. The entire swim team traveled to another state, carrying the hopes of the university on their shoulders. Unfortunately for Ethan, fate seemed determined to test his patience. He had been assigned a room with Kai. The moment Ethan saw the room assignment, a smug smile appeared on his face. "Let's see how long you can ignore me now." But Kai proved him wrong once again. Even after sharing a room, nothing changed. He barely spoke. If Ethan asked him a question, Kai answered with a simple yes or no. Nothing more. No arguments. No smiles. No reaction. At first, Ethan found it amusing, then annoying, then unbearable. Because Kai wasn't trying to ignore him anymore. It felt natural. As if Ethan genuinely didn't matter. And Ethan Hayes hated that feeling. The competition began the next morning. And for the first time, Ethan realized how much Kai had improved. Race after race, Kai shocked everyone. He swam like a completely different person. Confident, focused, fearless. The shy freshman everyone once laughed at was gone. In his place stood a swimmer capable of competing with the best. The audience noticed. The judges noticed. The reporters noticed. Even rival universities noticed. By the end of the first day, people were talking about Kai everywhere. Who is that kid? Where did he come from? He's incredible. Normally, those conversations would have been about Ethan. Not anymore. And Ethan hated how much that bothered him. The worst part wasn't the attention. It was Coach Mercer. Every time Kai finished a race, Coach was there, praising him, encouraging him, telling everyone how proud he was. The pride in his voice was impossible to miss. And every word felt like a knife twisting deeper into Ethan's chest. For years, Ethan had been the star swimmer, the face of the team, the person everyone talked about. Now, he had to share that spotlight. And he wasn't handling it well. The tournament ended with a massive victory. The university won the team championship. Both Ethan and Kai won several medals. But there was one difference. Everyone expected Ethan Hayes to win. Nobody expected Kai Nakamura to. That made Kai the story of the tournament. Overnight, he became a star. People wanted pictures with him. Reporters wanted interviews. Even other swimmers wanted to talk to him. And Ethan hated himself for being jealous. But he was. The night before returning home, the team decided to celebrate. Everyone gathered at a crowded bar near the hotel. Music blasted from the speakers.
People laughed, drank,
celebrated their victory. By then, Ethan was already irritated and exhausted. So when Jacob and a few other swimmers started teasing Kai again, Ethan didn't stop them. When they pressured Kai into drinking, Ethan still said nothing. After all, they had done the same thing to countless freshmen before. It was just harmless fun. At least that was what Ethan told himself. Kai clearly wasn't comfortable. He refused several times. But eventually the pressure became too much. Throughout the night, Ethan occasionally noticed Kai looking toward him, almost as if expecting him to say something.
To stop them. To help.
But Ethan ignored it. He was too busy being angry, too busy feeling replaced, too busy thinking about himself. And eventually he got drunk enough to stop thinking altogether. The rest of the night became a blur. He didn't remember returning to the hotel. He didn't remember who helped him back to his room. He didn't remember anything. A splash of freezing water hit his face. Ethan jumped upright. What the hell? His words stopped immediately. Coach Mercer was standing over him. 3 teammates stood behind him. All of them looked terrified. Ethan glanced at the clock. 12:43 a.m. What are you guys doing? Coach ignored the question. Instead, he asked one of his own. Where is Kai? The room suddenly felt colder. Ethan looked toward the second bed. Empty. His stomach dropped. I don't know. Coach's face darkened. Ethan immediately grabbed his phone and searched for Kai's number. Before he could press call, Coach spoke again. Don't bother. We've already called him more than 20 times. Ethan looked at the screen. No answer. Phone switched off. For the first time that night, real fear entered his chest. Where did you leave him? Coach demanded. I didn't leave him anywhere. Then why isn't he here? How am I supposed to know? Ethan snapped. I'm not his parent. But even as he said the words, they sounded wrong. Because he knew Kai had been drunk. And suddenly a terrifying question entered his mind. If Kai was drunk, then where was he? Then Coach Mercer suddenly grabbed Ethan's collar. Listen to me carefully, Ethan. Coach Mercer's hand tightened around the collar of his shirt. If something happens to Kai, I will never forgive you. The anger in his voice was unlike anything Ethan had ever heard before. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Coach Mercer released him and stepped away. Normally, Ethan would have exploded. Nobody grabbed him like that.
Nobody spoke to him like that.
Nobody. But for the first time, Ethan didn't care. His eyes kept drifting toward the empty bed. Kai wasn't there. That was all he could think about. Where is he? The next few hours felt like a nightmare. The entire team spread across the city. Some searched the streets around the hotel. Others checked nearby restaurants and stores. Coach Mercer spoke to hotel staff, security guards, and anyone who might have seen a drunk college student wandering alone. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was as if Kai had vanished. At first, Ethan told himself everything was fine. Kai was stubborn. Maybe he was angry. Maybe he wanted to be alone. Maybe he was sleeping in another teammate's room. But as the hours passed, those excuses started sounding ridiculous. His calls went unanswered. His messages stayed unread. And little by little, fear began replacing his anger. Think carefully. Ethan grabbed Jacob's shoulder. Where did you leave him?
Jacob looked exhausted.
I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? We were drunk. Jacob rubbed his eyes. I remember bringing you back to the hotel. And Kai. I thought he was behind us. You thought? Jacob looked away. I don't remember. The answer made Ethan feel sick. Nobody remembered. Nobody knew. Nobody had checked. As the night grew darker, Ethan's thoughts became louder. He remembered Kai at the bar, refusing the drinks, trying to push the glass away. Jacob laughing. The others cheering, forcing him. And then another memory surfaced. Kai looking at him, not once, several times. At the time, Ethan ignored it. Now, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Maybe Kai wanted help. Maybe he expected Ethan to stop them. Maybe he thought Ethan would do the right thing. The realization made Ethan's stomach twist. For weeks he had blamed Kai for everything. For making him jealous. For threatening his position. For taking Coach Mercer's attention. But now none of that seemed important. Because Kai was missing. And Ethan couldn't stop wondering if it was partly his fault. Unable to think anymore, he returned to his room. The room felt wrong without Kai. The second bed sat untouched. His backpack was still there. His swimming gear was still there. Everything was exactly where Kai had left it. Except Kai himself. Ethan sat on his bed and stared at the empty mattress. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. His thoughts refused to stop. What if he's hurt? What if he's alone? What if something happened and nobody can find him? For the first time in years, Ethan lowered his head. He wasn't sure when he started praying. Only that he couldn't stop. Please let him be okay.
Please. Please.
While the team searched desperately for Kai, nobody knew what had really happened that night. After being forced to drink far more than he could handle, Kai's head had become dizzy and heavy. At some point during the celebration, he realized the voices around him had become quieter. When he looked up, most of his teammates were gone. The bar was nearly empty. For a moment he thought they would come back. Someone would realize he was missing. Someone would notice. So he stayed where he was, waiting. His phone had already died earlier that night, but in his drunken state, he barely noticed. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. The staff started cleaning tables around him.
Still nobody came.
Kai tried to convince himself they were probably looking for him. Maybe Coach Mercer had sent someone. Maybe Jacob.
Maybe
Ethan. The thought came unexpectedly. As much as Kai hated admitting it, a small part of him believed Ethan would come. After all, Ethan had been the one who convinced him to return to the team. The one who promised things would be different. The one who told him to trust him. So Kai waited. And waited. And waited. But Ethan never came. Because while Kai sat alone in the bar, Ethan was already unconscious in his hotel room, completely drunk and unaware of everything happening around him. Eventually, Kai stood up. His legs felt weak. The room spun around him. But staying there wouldn't solve anything. So, he decided to find the hotel himself. Bad decision. The city was unfamiliar. The streets blurred together. The alcohol made it impossible to think clearly. Streetlights stretched into long lines of light. Cars became moving shadows. Kai stumbled forward one step at a time, trying to remember the way back, trying to stay awake, trying not to fall. Then he saw headlights. Bright. Too bright. For a brief second, he couldn't understand why they were getting closer. Then he realized something terrifying. He wasn't standing on the sidewalk. He was standing in the middle of the road. The realization came 1 second too late. Tires screeched. A horn blared through the night. And then everything went black. Around 4 in the morning, Coach Mercer's phone rang. The entire hallway fell silent. Everyone watched him answer. Nobody dared speak. Nobody dared move. As Coach listened, his expression changed. Relief.
Fear. Panic. Hope.
All at once. Then he lowered the phone. We found him. Nobody breathed. He's in the hospital. The drive there felt endless. No one spoke. The silence was unbearable. Ethan stared out the window the entire way. Streetlights flashed across the glass. His hands were clenched so tightly they hurt. For the first time in his life, he would have traded every medal he owned for one thing. To hear Kai complain. To hear Kai argue. To hear Kai tell him he was selfish. Anything. Anything would have been better than this silence. When they arrived, police officers stood outside the emergency department. The sight alone made Ethan's chest tighten. Something was wrong. Very wrong. A doctor led them through the hallways. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. Machines beeped somewhere in the distance. Then Ethan saw him. And everything else disappeared. Kai lay motionless on the hospital bed. Bandages wrapped around his head. Bruises darkened parts of his face. His arm was secured in a cast. Several machines surrounded him. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor echoed through the room. For a moment Ethan couldn't move. Just yesterday Kai had been standing beside him on the podium. Just yesterday people had been cheering his name. Now he looked so small. So fragile. As if one more bad thing could break him completely. The sight hit Ethan harder than any race he had ever lost. A memory flashed through his mind. Kai standing beside the pool weeks ago. Trying not to cry. Trying not to look scared. Trying to act strong. And suddenly Ethan understood something he had never allowed himself to see before. Kai had been afraid of him. Truly afraid. Not annoyed. Not frustrated, afraid. The realization felt like a punch to the chest. Ethan looked away, but he couldn't escape the guilt. Every cruel word, every insult, every time he looked the other way, every chance he had to help and chose not to. It all came rushing back. And for the first time, Ethan couldn't find a single excuse for himself. Not one. His eyes burned. His throat tightened. But he didn't cry. Not yet. He simply stood there staring at the unconscious boy, feeling smaller than he ever had before. You were right, Kai. I am selfish. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Hayes hated the person he had become. Kai trusted Ethan to come back for him, but Ethan never did. Now, with Kai lying unconscious in a hospital bed, one question remains. Will Kai hate Ethan for the rest of his life? Or will this tragedy become the beginning of something neither of them ever expected? Find out in the next episode of A Lone Star and His Broken Angel, tomorrow night.